Awesome. Yeah, I love gathering with Jen. I mean, she just brings so much enthusiasm to every room that she's in. I feel like she's just a lovely person to have around. Like she's just easy to like.
She
So we
is.
bring her back as, an expert speaker and try to figure out ways that we can work her in. We're like, maybe we could do a beer tasting. We could turn this into a beer tasting. That'd be fine.
Why not?
You have an outstanding smile.
Sorry?
I said, and she has an outstanding smile.
She does. So I think I may kick it off asking you all, what's your favorite craft beer, or how did you get into liking craft beer? And if you don't drink it, it's fine. I know Aaron may not, but I know the other two do. I only started drinking craft beer because of Jen, so.
She got you.
The pressure's on, Aaron.
I know. I feel like I need to go check in my drawer. Like, what do I have that's unique? I really lean on my local beer shop. Like, what have you got that's new and local? I'll buy one of everything. I usually go that route.
That's a great way to support. That's community.
Yeah. Problem is, then I go back in the store and I'm like, I don't remember what I liked. I'll just get the same thing. That's fine. Yeah, one of everything. Maybe two. Do you guys have a go-to?
Yes, but it changes all the time. So like I'm a style, like I'm seasonal, so I just drink certain styles during certain times of the year. So I'll less like specific breweries and more like specific styles.
Okay.
I live that lager life, so there's that.
I like Saison now. I used to be a wheat person, but it doesn't sit right with me anymore. So now I'm into Saisons.
Yeah. I find that if I have wheat beers, I move straight into the headache zone. I'm like, well.
I get bloated. I don't know what it is. So.
It's funny because a lot of people are like, what is your favorite? And I really can never say, but I generally end up saying I don't really drink wheat.
Yeah. Not anymore. And that used to be my like go-to. But I like a sour too.
Kind of depends on the season. Yeah. Now that it's getting warm, move into a different zone.
Right.
It's good.
Did you end up opening that beer, or are you still on the water?
No.
I got myself a bubble water because I'm team bubble water right now, and
it's also 3:30.
That's what I drink all day long.
I was gonna pop back in to let us know when to start, or do we just start at 3:30?
I think she just wants us to kick it off when it's ready to kick off.
You know what I can do though? I'm gonna, before we start, let me go.
Actually, your house is very beautiful.
I'm sorry?
Your background, like your home around you is like very beautiful.
It's just the clean part.
But I love the setup, like I love the setup.
Just be cleaning like this view. And
oh boy.
So true.
You never know, right? Like I'm in a storage closet, but you paint the wall and it's like, that's an office with a wall right behind me.
Well, guys, I think we should go ahead and get started here. I think we're live. I was trying to go to the YouTube page on my other device to see if I could, pull us up as we're speaking, but I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Oh, well, I just heard you can just go ahead and get started. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Today is the final day of the Atlanta Beer Boutiques Crafted for Action Craft Beer Conference. It has been an amazing week of programs, and today's the last day. And we have this amazing panel, Community Accountability, Making Intentional Connections Outside of Brewery Walls. My name is Michelle Arrington. I'm going to serve as the moderator. I work in community engagement for a telecommunications company. And additionally, I have an initiative called A Seat at the Table, where I like to create programming and initiatives focused on minority entrepreneurs, social justice actions, voting rights, et cetera, a host of things. And in the past, I've partnered with Atlanta Beer Boutique to do a small business entrepreneurship series. So one, I want to give a shout out to Jennifer Price of the Atlanta Beer Boutique for really creating this amazing creative conference. The purpose of the conference, I think, really is the essence of what we're going to discuss today. I don't know if you all agree, right? It's to find common ground, bring communities together, discuss actionable ways that we can create change within the craft beer community and with our communities at large. So this past week, I think we've heard about science and innovation. Last night was an amazing panel on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think this is right on time, and that leads us to today. I'm going to introduce our three amazing panelists here. First up, we have Letitia Cook from Beer Culture. She's the president and CEO. Beer Culture is a St. Petersburg, Florida nonprofit focused on increasing diversity and inclusion in the craft beer industry. She was born in the Bronx. She is a wife, mother of four, a certified, I always mess this word up, Cicerone. Oh, I'm proud of myself. Jennifer will be proud. Beer server, a published author and entrepreneur. And in her leadership role at Beer Culture, she's guided the team in launching an array of initiatives to diversify craft beer, including scholarships and internships, a very cool job board that I checked out earlier. And so we're going to hear a lot more about Beer Culture and what she's doing to really connect community. Next up, we have Erin Engelhardt. She's the program director, She is the program director for Start Me. That is an intensive accelerator for micro businesses in Clarkston, Eastlake, and Southside communities of Atlanta. During sessions and beyond, Start Me connects entrepreneurs to the business know-how, mentors, funding that's necessary to build and grow their ventures. Start Me is in a partnership of Emory University's Goizueta Business School, and they work with local nonprofits. To date, I think these numbers are impressive. They have served over 300 small businesses. These businesses account for 600 jobs, and they generate 12 million in annual sales. And 84% of the ventures are people of color, 65% Black led, and 72% female led. So shout out to Start Me. Can't wait to learn more about that program. And then lastly, we have Dr. J. Nicole Jackson of Executive Director of Craft by EDU. She is a former professor of communication studies. So Dr. J dedicated her academic career to the study of American beer. Today, she helps craft beer organizations develop inclusive, equitable, and just practices that drive success, build communities, and empower individuals through her consultancy, Crafted for All. As the founder and executive director of Craft by EDU, the nonprofit's mission is to champion equity, inclusion, and justice in the craft brewing community through education and professional development. In 2018, she was named the Brewers Association first ever diversity ambassador. And today, Dr. J leads the Brewers Association's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Department as the association's equity and inclusion partner. So welcome, ladies, so much. Glad to have you. So I want to go ahead and jump into it. And I'm going to ask some specific questions, but I think the first question I'm going to ask you about is, how did you get into loving craft beer for Letitia and Jay?
Oh, goodness. So I got into beer. I was introduced by my husband. His name is Dom Cook. He is also the co-founder of Beer Culture. And he found a love for craft beer after the loss of our son. He went on this journey to just finding something that he felt, he was able to connect to, and that was beer for him. And so he made it his life's mission at the time to find a beer that I would like. It was a long, arduous journey, but finally we have arrived. And that is how I was introduced to beer.
How about you, Jay?
Yeah, so I was drinking a lot of shitty beer in college. I think that's what
We
you
all
would call it.
did.
Yeah, like
We
out
all
of a funnel. And I worked in this little sports bar in the town where I did my undergrad, and at the end of the night, you got a shift beer, anything on draft, and they were like, "Jay, what do you want?" And I was like, "Whatever's most expensive." And that's how I started tasting different beers. Like I didn't care what it was. I was like, just give me what the priciest thing we have on right now is, and ended up tasting a lot of things that I loved. And it was just kind of history after that.
Well, I can tell you, I got into craft beer through Atlanta Beer Boutique, attending a lot of the beer tastings, and I've become a beer snob. And I don't mind it, and I turn up my nose when I don't see a good beer list. I've become one of those people, and I hate Jennifer, and I love her for it. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with Aaron. I want to hear about this Start Me Accelerate. I mean, you all are doing some amazing work in the community. Give us a little snippet of what you do and how it came about.
Yeah, so I think that you introduced it really well. So I'll kind of start from there. But effectively, we serve entrepreneurs in communities, and we very much take that as a connection-oriented approach. So it's never, a business school operating in isolation. It is a community approach to supporting local entrepreneurs. We know that passionate, committed entrepreneurs are everywhere. They're in all communities. But in order to thrive, they need access to business knowledge. They need access to supportive networks, and they need access to capital. They need money to get started. And that's not accessible everywhere. And so what we do is try to build community-based programs that support those entrepreneurs that already have the good ideas. They already are starting and scaling things, and they need that network around them to be more successful. In each case, we do partner with local nonprofits who have that same community mission and community focus. We build coalitions of your neighborhood associations and business associations, schools, everyone who's really trying to support the community. And then we bring in a lot of supportive volunteer mentors to really lend their time and talents to support those entrepreneurs. And then I think the real critical piece is we support entrepreneurs and we connect them to one another. So we foster those connections so that those relationships endure, and they have that network of peer entrepreneurs that they can lean on as they continue to build and grow their businesses.
Now, to follow up, you talked a little bit about the mentorship program. Is there a way that the community becomes involved? Like, how do you become a mentor if you wanted to serve?
That's a great question. So we engage a lot of mentors. We run 3-month accelerator programs, and across the 3 communities, we're serving 45 to 50 businesses at a time. And with that, we bring in 70 to 80 mentors. And so some are returning. We always bring in a lot of new mentors as well. And we're always looking to bring in new, committed, talented professionals who really want to lend their expertise. Some are entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs make really good mentors because they know what it's like to wear all the hats in a business and try to balance working on and in a business at the same time. But there's also a lot that folks who've spent their careers in what I'll call big business, if you will, focused 100% on operations or strategy or finance or accounting. They can take that and translate that to serving small businesses. I think more broadly, folks who are interested in dedicating their time and really giving of their resources in that way, there are a lot of opportunities to do that. You can volunteer through a program like ours, but you can also connect with organizations like SCORE. You can look at local neighborhood groups. There are a lot of youth groups that are supporting entrepreneurship. And so looking in the community around you and finding a match between what you love doing with your time and the skills you have, and then the needs and interests of others is really a great opportunity to find meaningful mentorship opportunities.
That's such an amazing point, and I want to come back to that. I want to go to Jay and tell us a little bit about Craft by EDU and how you started.
Yeah, thanks. So Craft by EDU is a nonprofit organization we started in November of 2019. And for me, I think of it as like the stopgap for all these other things that were going on. So one, I come from a higher education background. So I think in one important sense, it's a bit of a bridge from my kind of past career in higher ed to this kind of future career that I'm still
I was going to
defining.
ask you, how did you move from communications into this?
So I wrote my doctoral dissertation about beer. So I've always been writing about beer. I managed a homebrew shop. That's how I made money for like food and gas in college. So I've been close to beer since the late 90s. That's been a long-standing passion of mine. And a lot of people are like, how does that get into communication? But I always tell people we communicate more with inanimate objects than we do with our words. Right? And food and beverage is so steeped in meaning, whether you're talking about birthday cakes or breastfeeding or romantic dinners or having a beer. We say and do and pass so much meaning in these gestures. So, in the United States, beer has been in some moments so imbued with meaning that threatened people, right? That we did prohibition and we decided we weren't going to have any alcohol at all. And, in other moments, like when the reason we're all together right now is you have a formation like craft beer, and it came to mean something very, very significant, very specific culturally. Like nobody set down the rules, but everybody knows what meanings circulated around this commodity, craft beer. And I think the reason we're even here together is because we're trying to break down those meanings and allow the meanings to flourish, right? But to get back to Craft by EDU, I think in some cases it really was the result of having so many conversations where people were like, you know what we should do? We should do X, right? And X was kind of like not a thing that somebody was going to be willing to pay you for, and not a thing that was necessarily going to support your livelihood, but was absolutely mission driven, absolutely needed to happen. And so Craft by EDU kind of became that vehicle where it was like all the projects that I knew weren't going to be like the center of my livelihood, but that I just felt need to happen. And so that's kind of where Craft by EDU came from.
Now, I know you do a lot in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion. When we talk about the craft beer industry, we don't often see a lot of women. We don't often see a lot of women of color. What does that mean to you to have that role? And what do we do to further accelerate that role when we talk about community?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is a question I often chew on constantly, obviously. And, I think there are a couple of different things that need to happen from a couple of different directions. And what's exciting to me now is that we're at the point where we have an ecosystem of people chipping away at the problems, chipping away at the issues, right? We have lots of people providing different things in different spheres. And I think we are finally kind of getting to that level where we can start looking across and saying, okay, let's map this terrain and let's kind of look at what everyone's doing, because things are starting to fit together in really awesome and interesting ways. I think with Craft by EDU, it's the mirror image to me of some of the other work I do. So most of my work is industry focused. It's B2B. So I'm usually working with breweries or associations or industry participants, and trying to affect change within the industry. With Craft by EDU, I think it's more about trying to affect change with the industry. So rather than being the target of the intervention, I'd like the industry to become the tool. And I think with Craft by EDU, one of the biggest things we're kind of looking at doing is making some introductions that have been long overdue. Those of you who saw the conversation last night about supply chain, right? About looking at the whole entire supply chain of the industry and seeing gaps. That's certainly something that Craft by EDU has thought about. In fact, we do some granting and scholarships, and we actually specifically don't do technical brewing because we were like, you know what, other people are doing that really well. We don't need to reproduce that effort. We can, lift up people who are doing that and like, scream their praises from the mountaintops, and then we'll do what we do. So we're kind of looking at the rest of the supply chain and saying, how do we make introductions? So a great example for me is if you look at the populations of HBCUs, and most in the Mid-Atlantic and the South, so many of them have robust agricultural sciences programs. But there's not a kind of clear line of connection between those programs and our malting industries and our hop growing industries. And if you want to take it beyond beer, in our fruit production, orcharding industries, right? And I'm just like, that's an introduction that needs to happen, because there's a pipeline of talent that's being I don't even know if ignored is the right word. I don't even think they're just even on the radar, right? In terms of the producers of some of the raw ingredients in our supply chain. So, I think the cohesion that needs to continue to happen in making introductions, in knitting together, organizations who are doing the work. Eventually that's going to create like a tight system of care where there's someone to catch everybody no matter what situation they're in. And that's an exciting prospect.
I want to come back to that HBCU comment. I'm a proud HBCU graduate at Howard University, but
you Howard folks have been all over this. Have you noticed this?
I have. I'm enjoying it. But one reason I'm here in Atlanta, and one thing that Jennifer Price and I talk about consistently is the new breweries that are popping up around the Atlanta University Center, and why isn't there a tie-in? So I'm gonna come back when I ask about really community accountability, but I want to go ahead and go to Letitia and want to hear a lot more about beer culture. Your tagline, I noticed, says, "Together we change the world, one beer at a time." So tell us, what does that mean, and how does beer culture really work to foster the community?
Yeah, so funny story. When beer culture has been around since 2017, right? We didn't always have a team of people. And so when we reorganized and I created our team, one of the questions that I asked each of them was, do you believe that you have the ability to change the world? And I love this question because a lot of people normally would look at that and laugh, right? What do you mean? Do I have the ability to change the world? Who am I to change the world, right? It's laughable if you really think about it. But the people that I talked to were enthusiastically like, yes, absolutely. And I needed people that were crazy enough to believe that they had the ability to change the world. And so what that did for us was the very basic of what we say is important, right? Collaboration. So working together as a team, we do have the ability to change the world. Now, our tagline is one beer at a time, or one cider at a time, or one spirit at a time, whatever that is. And the reason that is because that's how we raise our funds, right? It takes money to make things happen. And so what we do essentially is work together with breweries or cideries or anybody within the craft beverage space, and we collaborate on a beverage. The collaboration doesn't just end at the beverage or start at the beverage. We come together and find ways that make sense for us to affect change within our hyper local communities and then nationally, right? And so that's what we do. Changing the world one beverage at a time. That requires the very people who are crazy enough to believe that they can do it.
I love that. I mean, I think that is powerful, and it really makes a statement about community. I think to Jay's point about creating a pipeline and getting more people involved. You're helping to do that. So can you tell us a little bit more about the job board and the internships and scholarships that beer culture offers, and what have you seen the outcome? Has it really affected a positive change? I'm sure it has, but I'd love to hear more.
Yeah. So I get asked the question, do you see the change like already from the things that you were doing? And it's so funny because it's like, I didn't expect to, within a week see, more Black people in a brewery, or, within a matter of days, see the diversity that we say we want to see, right? But that's almost exactly what happened. It's like, we started organizing, we created programs, and then you look around and it's like, holy shit, this is crazy. Like, it looks like what we've always hoped it could look like. It doesn't look like that everywhere, right? But to Jay's point, a lot of people are, starting to sprout up, and they're doing things that are affecting the change that we want to see. And so back to our programs, what we do is we have a scholarship called This Ain't the Beer That You're Used To. Dom put out a book in 2017 called This Ain't the Beer That You're Used To. That book was impactful for people who they didn't have like a grasp on what beer is or what it could be. And so the scholarship represents what the book represented, right? It creates an opportunity for people who either don't have the access or the knowledge to progress within the beer space. And so we have scholarships that pay for Cicerone certifications, which is in partnership with Cicerone, so shout out to them. We have a certified beer server, which is the very basic, it's level 1. That is you go through a course, you can take your time, so it can be a full day, or it could be a number of weeks, or it could be a month. And you go through the course, you get the certification at the end of the course. We have certified Cicerone, which is pretty much the same, but it's more extensive. So that one, usually it takes you about a year or two to pretty much study for that test so that you can pass. We also provide keeping and serving beer scholarships, which is the very basic. So if you're just curious about, what beer is and how do you serve it, that scholarship is great for those kinds of people. Aside from the scholarships that get you certifications, we have a number of internships. So when you think about the craft space, right, you usually think brewing, and not everybody wants to be a brewer or can be a brewer, right? I'm not getting up at nobody's 5 o'clock in the morning to go tote no hops or do none of that. But I love beer, and a lot of people do. So there are many other things that you can do where you can take your skills and you can bring them into the space. So what does that mean, right? You think about journalists, the people who are telling the stories about beer. We have a journalism internship that, pays you to go through the internship so that you can learn and you can write and you can tell those stories. We also have the marketing and PR side of things. We collaborated with our marketing and PR people. It's bringing those people in sideline who are already doing the things that you think are dope and great, right? So to Jay's point, again, not reinventing the wheel, but collaborating with people who are already doing the work. So collaborating with our marketing and PR people and saying, hey, this is a great skill that people can use. Let's make this internship happen. Let's pay some people to come in here to learn and do. Outside of the marketing and PR, we have a grant that we just announced. It's called the Sparks Foundation. So support for Black men. And I love telling the story about why this is important to me specifically. So I Googled what is out there that will help Black men start business or get a trade or anything. There's a plethora of things out there to support, me as a Black woman. But there's not very much out there for Black men. And so I'm like, this is where we struggle. Let's go ahead and create something that's going to be a guide or a leg up for Black men that are out there. So the Sparks Foundation will pay for you to get a trade, or it's a $5,000 grant that helps you launch your business plan. So we have a number of programs. We're always looking for innovative ways of doing things so that we can affect change within our communities. Yeah.
No, that's amazing. And that, I'm gonna throw this to Aaron, so business gets this $5,000 grant and they get their business plan, and then they come to a program like Start Me, right? And you all take them through this cohort where they're learning all the basics, the one-on-one of businesses. What are the measurable outcomes from the program? And after you graduate, do you all keep in touch with the businesses and track them and help and assist? And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there are some clear tangibles, right? Like exiting with a business plan, exiting with really clear financials. This starts to become a little more intangible, like having a good strategy and comfort executing against that strategy, but also having networks around you that supported you through a 3-month accelerator, but that you can continue to call upon. You need some legal guidance. You need to ask a question of an accountant. You need a buddy who has, an in a particular industry. And so that's what's, a little bit more difficult to kind of capture. We track a lot of data. And I think one thing that's challenging about keeping track of really diverse businesses with really diverse goals is that we don't want to prescribe what their pathway looks like. We want to meet them where they are and help them move in the direction of where they want to go. So that might be taking a side hustle and turning it into like a formalized part-time gig. That might be making the leap into doing this full time. That might be scaling to hiring 5 or 10 people or opening a storefront. And so we capture all of those things, and collectively they start to tell a story of what people can do when they are given the space to pursue their passion and their talent. And there's also a small piece of that is capturing folks who either realize they don't love being entrepreneurs, but they develop a skill that they can apply to a typical, W-2 type role, or they realize that what they're working on business-wise maybe is never going to be more than a hobby for them. They don't love doing it, or they're not going to make any money doing it, and they can take those skills and apply it to a new venture. So we see a lot of those successes as well. Before people put too much time and energy and money into a venture and they feel like they're trapped and can't get out of that, they can make that decision for themselves, and they're empowered to move on to what they want to do with that business. Does that answer your question?
No, that does. I mean, I think it really, when you talk about community, it's a support beyond, right? You focused on that. And in addition, helping people really identify what they want to do. You might think you want to start a business and you don't want the headache of it, or you don't really understand. And, Jay, I'm going to throw this next question at you because I remember you saying this. There are other ways that you can be involved, right, in the craft beer industry, right? And I think Letitia mentioned as well, everyone's not a brewer. And so it's finding those pathways. I know last night we talked about agriculture. Was innovation on science and innovation and what that looks like. How important, well, let me ask it this way. When we talk about community, one of the reasons, and I think about diversity, I think one of the things that we have to do is to show people all aspects of a business, right? We always have this mindset that this is the way it goes. And I think Aaron just said, people think it's the 1, 2, 3. Don't put people in a pigeonhole. So Jay, how important it is to let people know about all of these type of opportunities and what you can do? How important is that?
Yeah, it's critical. And I would go as far as to say that it's maybe one of the bigger barriers that we're facing to kind of opening up some of the pipelines to breweries. So one of the things, Craft by EDU was working on prior to COVID, where these events called opportunity fairs, they were going to be held, hosted by HBCUs. They were kind of these 3-prong events. So it was professional development, a career fair, and a networking event. The professional development was actually for brewing industry people who were attending, and it was about attracting and retaining diverse talent. The career fair was taking place on campus, free of cost for students at the host colleges to come meet folks in the industry. And the idea was to get participants who are not just breweries, right, but distributors, retailers, people who make logistics software, people who sell hops, people who run yeast labs, really to like reach up and down the supply chain, and then have a networking event that allowed people to kind of sit down face to face and talk, have some drinks, taste some beer, get an introduction to the industry. Obviously, our inaugural event was scheduled for April 6th, and COVID said no. And we, as the board, me and the board, had a really frank conversation about whether or not we wanted to try to take the event virtual, and we decided not to. And one of the most important things for us was that these events were structured to get members of the industry to get out of their comfort zone and go to a place where they are not the majority. And we thought that experience was so critical to having these events that we decided we'd rather shelve them until we can do them in person than to try to do it online, because that's so important. So I bring that up to say that I think it goes both ways, right? Like, I think it's important to introduce people who might want to be part of the industry to all of the range of different ways they can engage the industry. I also think it's important for people in the industry to get out of the industry when they're talking about bringing people in and see new ways that they can be engaged, right? Because one of the things that you hear if you hang around craft beer long enough is that we tell the same damn stories over and friggin' over and over, right? Like, you ask how many people started a brewery, you will hear 100 boring stories of people home brewing in their garage, right? One of the things I love is when people are like, no, I was a school teacher. No, I was a professional salsa dancer. No, I was, they were doing like all sorts of other stuff, right? And are not telling the same story. So, this speaks to me, this speaks to what I think is one of the most important pieces of thinking about community accountability, is that you can't go in with your industry or your business and think of the boundaries of your enterprise as solid, right? There are a lot of organizations out there who are kind of plop themselves down in a community, wherever it is, and they have an organizational culture. They have their organizational roles, but the boundaries of that culture are rigid. And I always want to say to people, like, no, that's got to be a porous boundary, right? Like, you have to be able to get exchange, culture in, culture out. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to authentically be accountable to that community if there are boundaries around what you're doing. And the hard part is that when people want to start opening up those doors and breaking down those boundaries, the first question they ask is kind of like, what should I do? Or how can I go? And I'm always like, you actually should maybe get out of the way. Or maybe just say, what can I learn, rather than what can I do, right? We are not a very asset-minded industry. We still look at people through a deficit mindset. What are they lacking? Why can't they fit into this culture? And I always want to say, like, we have to first dump this deficit mindset and start looking through porous boundaries and say, what are all the assets that I have not taken advantage of? Because the second we make that move, there is a different relationship we have as an industry.
I think that's so important. We talk about, connections outside of the brewery walls. I told you all I do community engagement for a living. And one thing that we try to do is we do focus groups with different nonprofits, different organizations, community leaders. And we ask them, what's going on in your community? What do you need? And I think that's a challenge I'm going to put out to everybody that's watching. Everybody's been part of this challenge, a part of this conference, especially the breweries. If you're moving into the West End of Atlanta, the Summer Hills of Atlanta, you need to ask the community what they need. To the HBCU point, like, have the breweries reached out to Clark, Morehouse, Spelman, and Morris Brown and said, let's do HBCU night? Or why don't we develop a brewery program, or why don't we do a beer tasting and connect with those HBCUs and build that pipeline there? That's community accountability, right? Moving into, and not just moving to the neighborhood because it's near the belt line and it's popular. Of course, I mean, you want to make money, but you make money by being inclusive, right? And building. So I'm very glad that you brought that up. One thing that I think I'm gonna go over here to Letitia, and I had another question for you. I wanted to know, well, I guess I'll ask this question a little early, but I want to know, what do you think does community accountability mean to you? And what does it look like moving beyond the walls?
Yeah, so community accountability is like we described, when you go into a place, it's actually connecting with the culture that exists. And that doesn't mean, bending or leaving yours behind, but you come together and you mix something that's new and beautiful. I think about like where I come from, right? I was born and raised in the Bronx, New York, and I think that is the most colorful, it's the melting pot of the world, right? So you go and you pick up so many different cultures. And accountability looks like that to me. It's colorful and it's bright and it's beautiful, and everybody goes and feels like this is home. And so when I think about breweries, at the end of the day, a brewery is a business, right? So your business model is to A, make beer, and B, sell beer. But then we look at what the brewery space has always been, right? What has it always meant to people? And breweries say that we are community hubs, we are community spaces. And so we have to be, at the end of the day, who it is that we say we are. And so accountability looks like that, being who it is that we say we are.
Erin, I think the program that you all do is so amazing, and you serve 3 great communities. East Lake, I believe, what was it? East Lake, I know.
Clarkston and the South.
Clarkston, yeah. And so how do we get 100 more Start Me's in Metro Atlanta, in Georgia? What does that look like? And, would that be a program that would go on the road to some of these smaller communities or in other ways? Like, we talk about community accountability and getting beyond the walls.
That's a great question. And, we've never thought about doing a roadshow of entrepreneurship, but I think that we are one piece of a big ecosystem. There are a lot of other organizations. I see it within the purview of Atlanta, but this is true in other cities around the US and rural areas as well, that have a passion for serving entrepreneurs at various stages of businesses. So that's helping people figure out if they want to be entrepreneurs and kind of thinking through that process. That means meeting them where they are when they're starting and scaling. And then that means guiding them through the rest of that. And it's, it has to be diverse to reflect the diverse perspectives and ideas that people have. The way that you might grow a tech unicorn is a little bit different than you're going to want to grow a brewery or a mom and pop shop. And so embracing that diversity of perspective, I think, is really important. And then I think finding those ecosystem pieces and really fostering and supporting them. What that means is some of that is around resources, right? Supporting the kinds of things that you want to see, but beyond that, it's supporting the entrepreneurs that they support. Our success as a program is the success of the entrepreneurs that we serve. And to the extent that we are in the background, like applauding from the sidelines where no one sees you, but you're really celebrating people, that's a huge success for us. And so I love when I see that entrepreneurs are collaborating with one another, that people are celebrated on social media, that they make it into Atlanta Magazine or publications, and they're celebrated for the work that they're doing. And so I think, there's a lot of different ways that you can get involved, but I think just being a really intentional consumer is the easiest way to ensure the success of those businesses. So shopping locally, putting your likes and your recommendations behind those businesses, really publicly applauding and paying attention. And that is harder than not really looking in the community around you. I guess I kind of stepped away a little bit from your question about how to get a lot of programs like ours, but I think the way to get a lot of programs like ours is to bring attention to the fact that there are so many entrepreneurs that have so much fantastic potential, and they really just need a supportive network to help them get there.
Absolutely. That's community accountability. But that's also coming together and closing those gaps, those relationship gaps, the funding gaps, the career opportunity gaps that exist. So Jay, let me ask you this. How can we create more formalized opportunities to really create a true and lasting impact in the craft beer industry?
Let me unmute myself. Yeah, so I think, I am an infrastructure first person. So I always tell people, in the kind of space of doing this work, there are lots and lots of things that need to get done, right? And I make the analogy to like building and renovating a house or something along those lines. Probably I'm making this analogy because I'm in the middle of a home renovation. There are people who are really, really great at setting the environment, bringing the energy, right? Picking the paint, picking the furniture, and like affecting how the space feels. And that's super important. And then there are also people who are really good at like plumbing, right? And I kind of think of myself as the industry's plumber, right? Like I do by trade like data, data analysis is kind of what I do. I am decent at making connections. I like to do education work. So I think for me, it's not the only piece, but I think finding the kind of lacks of infrastructure and, building the infrastructure so that those who are really good at the bringing the energy, the front facing work, the getting out and going and like pressing flesh and getting people in the door, have the infrastructure to stand on, right? And I think one of the most important things that we can do is, again, as a community of people trying to affect change, start looking across at other folks and saying like, oh, you got drywall? I got pipe. Oh, you got a rug, sofa? Yeah, like, and just figuring out like how do we support the other folks who are all engaged in the work, and start, coordinating our skill sets, coordinating our resources, coordinating these experiences, because I genuinely believe we accomplish more together than we do in silos or individually. So I think that's important. I would say the second piece in terms of like how do we make change is people have to stop worrying about their intentions. Like this is a big thing. Yes.
You better
please. Yes. Explain that. Go in depth, please.
They need to stop. Like your intentions don't matter. Like that's the bottom line, right? Like that. Great for you that you have positive intentions. Super. But in the world of getting things done and making change and addressing inequity, in addressing injustice, it does not matter. People need to get serious and start looking at outcomes. Because in every other space that people take serious, they are laser focused on outcomes. If you talk to somebody about their sales, they don't talk to you about what they intended to sell, right? They talk to you about the damn receipts. And so I want people to think about the work we are doing and look at the receipts, right? Like your intentions are super duper, but if the receipts don't match, then that is not working, right? And we need to do it. So I think we have to get serious and bring a career-like, objective-driven approach to this work, or otherwise we're just out here like talking.
So I'm taking notes I know, like that's
Talk
the
us
mic.
over it. The end.
But I'm wearing this shirt that says "Support is a verb," right? I got it from Village Market ATL, which is a Black-owned retail shop at Punt City Market, which features all these small business entrepreneurs. But it's a verb, and it's to your action, your intention. Okay, great. But where's the action behind that? Where are the Start Me programs? Where are the mentors? Where are the funding resources? How are we really closing the gap? And so, Letitia, I'm going to throw this to you. What if breweries and other beer businesses really expanded their reach to better connect with the communities, in which they exist? What if they did that? What is the ideal utopia? What does that look like?
Life changing. Literally flips the world upside down. Like, can you even imagine? Like, if you think about, when you were a kid and you had these dreams and these goals, can you imagine being your dreams and your goals? Like, when you think about that, encompassing all that you think that you can be, actually being that, that's what would happen. We would live in a society that is just and fair, and we work together, to get outcomes that we believe we should get. It would be life changing. And furthermore, it is possible. It is possible. This is something that we can take these steps and actually do it. So when people think about, I'm bringing it back to changing the world, because when you think about it, you think it's not possible and you think you can't do it and it's so out of reach. No, baby. If you go and you jot the steps down and you do the steps and you get some people to help you push the steps forward, at the end of the day, we're going to look back and say, shit, we did it. We did everything that we said we were going to do. It would be life changing, and it is possible.
Erin, what does community accountability look like to you?
It's a good question, and what I would say kind of echoes a lot of what Jay and Letitia have already said. It means engaging, including, and working collaboratively with people, organizations, and other people. It also means starting wherever you are. That's a bit of that intention piece, and maybe you don't even know where your intentions are. You are where you are today, and that's where you have to start. But proactively reaching out and listening when it's hard and doing something with that. Sometimes you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It kind of goes back to what Jay was talking about with building a house. Like, there are already people who are putting up drywall and creating sofas. I don't have to do that part. But what you can do is find those people, include them in the conversation, and then you don't have to start from scratch. You can look at other organizations that are doing this. Look at organizations you admire in the industry and outside of the industry and ask them what they did and how they got there. And I think just like building a business or setting a strategy, you don't just know how to do it. You have to figure it out. And so you take and gather all the pieces. It grows over time. You try things and maybe it doesn't work out. Maybe it does. But you grow something that's meaningful and moves from that intention to that outcome because you've put the pieces into place. I think we have to move away from a little bit of that perspective that business or society are a zero-sum game. So I have to lose something for somebody else to succeed. And I don't think that that's true. I think that by including more voices, by including more people and organizations in the conversation, everyone gets to be part of that brighter community. And so I think really, finding ways to foster those conversations, but then act on it is really important.
I would say, creating a craft beer conference week is a great way to start, right? To bring everyone to the table. Jay, I'm going to ask you this question I ask everyone else. What is community accountability? We're about to close out. What does that mean? What does that look like?
I think it is shifting from ecosystems to ecosystems, right? Ecosystems being these networks of individuals who are all kind of self-interested, enmeshed in their own perspectives, and only working about this connections between the existing egos. Whereas the ecosystem, right, that is everything. That is all of the people around you. That is the environment around you. That is the supply chain, and it's impact focused. It says you're always asking the question, what is the impact I'm having on this, on the people around me? What is the impact I'm having on the land around me? What is the impact I'm having on the materials that are moving through the world, right? This is a different way of existing and living, but it is a compassionate way of living and existing. It is an ethical way of living and existing. And I think, I think that's kind of what community accountability means to me. It means like, it's not about like me and who I'm relating to. It's about, right, the broader ecosystem.
I think your house analogy is such a great way to end this and to focus on that. House is in a community, right? You think about your neighbors in your own neighborhood. It makes a difference. And if you have a dilapidated house at the end of the block, that brings down a property value, right? Or if you have a neighbor that you know doesn't have the money to fix up their house, you want to be able to help and assist. But your community is where you live. And within this entrepreneurship and small business and this craft beer community, we really have to look at our own houses, right? We have to take that reflection and see, what am I doing in my own house? But then how can I help the house next door to me and the house across the street? And how can I build this neighborhood, this community? So I get this from my mother because she's a teacher. So she always leaves you with a homework assignment. So everybody that's tuning in, watching, all the moderators and panelists and sponsors, I'm going to leave you with this homework assignment for you to go and to look at, one, answer the question, what does community accountability mean to you? What did you learn this week that you didn't know that you can improve upon and become and take an action and get involved in? And then how do you move outside the brewery walls into the community? So those are your three. I hope you wrote them down because I just forgot what I said. But they'll be on the video. But I think it was community accountability, right? What does that mean to you? How do you move beyond the brewery walls? And then what did you learn this week that you didn't know that you can take and make some action into what you're doing day to day? So that's all I had. Did anybody have one or two closing remarks before I close out? I think this has been an awesome session. I'm sitting here writing notes off of everything that you all said. But I do want to invite everybody. I think tomorrow is the last session. There's a Brews and Beats. I think there are just a few tickets left and available. Go to Atlanta Beer Boutique. Go to her website, Craft Beer Conference. Go to her Instagram. Oh, I want you all to share your pages and your handles. Give me 1 second. But tomorrow night, Brews and Beats at 8 p.m. And make sure you check those out. So, beer culture. Tell us how we can find you, social media pages, give your shout outs and all of that.
We are at www.beerculturewithak.com. All of our Twitter, Facebook, Instagrams is on the website, but we're everywhere as Beer Culture.
Awesome. Start Me Accelerator. Erin, where can we find out more information about Start Me?
Yeah, you can also find us online. So we're at startmeatl.org and then also on social with the same handle.
And Jay, where can we find you and hear more about Craft by EDU?
Sure. Yes, we are online at craftbyedu.org. The by on the website is an X, so craftxedu. If you find us on socials, it will be spelled out Craft by EDUBY. So we'd love to see you all there.
Absolutely, y'all. As we continue the conversation about community accountability, moving outside the walls, please take notes of what you did today and what you heard today. Thank our speakers. Make sure you follow them and support. Support is a verb. And thank you once again to Jennifer Price and to the Atlanta Beer Boutique for this amazing week. Have a good one.